What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to another episode of Eat, Train, Prosper. Today is Bryan and myself. We are going to get into some things covering the end of Bryan's diet, a little bit of a follow-up on the end of our ab training experiment, some strength cycle design, and then move into a little bit of more psychological stance and questions around training and nutrition and how it may fit currently into your lifestyle, different phases you may find yourself in, and how the paces of life will have you kind of fluctuating between these. But before we get into this, Bryan, what's the latest?
Love the way you frame that. It's going to be an awesome episode. I'm excited to talk about it all. What is the latest? Life is finally back to sanity. Kim's crazy week of work is done. Our nanny is back in action. She showed up yesterday. COVID scare over. Bryson started school again today. I have my structure back. I have my freedom. I can take a walk without worrying that the world is going to catch on fire. And by the world, I mean my house, because the world actually is on fire, unfortunately. So yeah, everything is good here. I had 2 sessions, did hams 2 days ago, and then did my upper body compound day yesterday. So I'm enjoying a much needed rest day today, and then back to another 2 days of training, and forward we move. I am 26 days away from the end of my diet, and I know we'll be talking about that as we get going too. So what is going on with you? How is deload week? Do you feel better?
Yes and no, and I'll kind of get into why. So on last episode, we talked about how I was feeling like just my joints were aching, heading the weekend into last episode. And then I was like exhausted, right? And then I got like 11 hours of sleep almost. Yep. Monday night going into Tuesday. And then what happened was like 3 nights in a row, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, wide awake at 3 a.m. And that is like the hallmark sign of elevated cortisol levels. And what was really interesting, so I have my check-in I check in on Thursdays with my coach. I reported this, and I'm like, what's really interesting is like I'm exhibiting these very high cortisol signals or symptoms, but I don't feel like that stressed out. Like I'm in control of a lot of things, right? I don't have a wife, don't have a family, don't have kids. I live a pretty cool life. I don't feel very stressed. And what we kind of was just like my training had caught up to me. I was coming off that long diet, and I still trained very, very hard throughout it because everything was progressing. And now, even though I'm not, back at maintenance yet, but I'm working way up, calories are now significantly higher. It kind of just caught up to me. And that is, I'm sure in different people, it may manifest in a few different, places first, but the first place for me was my joints. And then the second was energy levels. And then the third, and that big kind of like, I don't want to call it like a nail in the coffin, but the icing on the cake was waking up at 3 a.m., like wide awake, ready to start the day. But then the problem is like by like 11, I'd be dragging ass type of deal. So he's like, okay, here's what we're going to do, pull, and we're going to pull back training to like 3 to 4 RIR, like no intensity techniques, like very straightforward. And then I ended up like taking 2 days off this weekend, taking some adaptogens in the evening before bed, hot shower before bed, phone down at like 8:30, reading, blue blockers on, all that sort of thing. And I've been sleeping really, really good the past couple nights. So that was the good part of it. And then I don't want to call it not so good, but then the other side of it was we had family in town this weekend. And what that meant was like longer days, doing different things, meals out. And I just don't do well with it. And it's something, I think it has to do with a little bit of like my schedule as well and like my routineness. But man, even just like 2 days, right? I'm trying to think. We went out like Friday night. I had a meal out. So 3 meals out, right? Three, like basically 1 per day. And I'll always like kind of finagle the menu to be like what I want. So I was like ask, like, hey, no butter on this, please. Sauce on the side, sort of thing. But just by like not having control of those food sources and eating at different times, it just impacts me. Like digestion was off, bowel movements was off, more like backed up than anything, and that just kind of makes you feel strange where you're like full all day type of deal. But I was still kind of like hungry because I was only eating like 3 times per day, and I'm someone who eats like on the verge of 6 normally. And then my weight was just climbing like day over day, and it peaked at like 195.7 or something like that yesterday.
Okay. Yeah, that's rare because you had only been gaining like a pound in 4 weeks or something prior to that.
Yeah, marginal. Still sitting in the mid 191s, low 192s, and it like jumped like 3 pounds over like a 48-hour period. And then today it was back down. I'm in like the 193. So by the time I check in again on Thursday, I'm fairly certain it'll be back down in the 191s to high 191s to low 192s. But it's just really interesting how a little bit of the schedule change or just removing control of food sources will impact me, and then coupled with coming off the stress and stuff too. But I mean, that's been my last week. So not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily bad, but it wasn't great, just something different. And the one thing that I thought, the one last part I will add on that I want to wrap up on is it's very hard coaching yourself through some of these things. And that's why some of the things that I really love about having a coach, and I always recommend people, if you're interested in like going down this whole whatever, or this space, like hire a coach. Because I'm very well aware of all these high cortisol symptoms and signals. I spot it in my clients regularly. I can objectively provide them instruction on it. It's hard to do yourself because you are emotionally invested. And even though I was presenting all these clear high stress, high cortisol symptoms or signals, I do not think if I was coaching myself, I would have made the deload call and pulled everything back, because we like to think that we are special for some reason. And in the reality of it, it's good to have that check every once in a while that I am in fact very average, just like everyone else.
Yeah. So I'm guessing the answer to this is probably yes, because of the way that your coach handled it and took your RIR down and said no intensity techniques. But the Meadows program and the intensity of that program is potentially a catalyst for what sent you into that.
Agreed.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it could have been just kind of poor timing. You know, I started it when I was still objectively in a calorie deficit. Granted, reversing out, but still in a deficit. And then coupled with just doing it at the end of a long dieting period. So it could have just been something that ramped it up, a couple weeks faster than it may have. Or maybe if I didn't do that and was still sticking to my traditional non-intensity technique program, the calories would have gotten to a point where it would have kind of broke even type of thing. But a lot of that's all pretty much speculation. But yeah, I think you're pretty accurate there.
Gotcha. Might be worth revisiting it then at some point down the road when you're in a more like steady surplus.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. I like that. Well, let's see. Ab training. We just finished our ab training. So
I wanted to interject real quick. It took me, because when I started, I couldn't find the ab wheel, and I was like trying to find suitable replacements and stuff. So I probably have about 2 extra weeks until I would say I have like a solid 8 weeks of training it. But yeah, I just wanted to.
Okay, cool. So you're not done with your ab training experiment yet.
I would have not quite half-assed it, but like 3/4-assed it if I stopped it.
Yeah. No, totally.
So quarter, I suppose.
Yeah, I just posted about mine yesterday, and originally, like I am still underwhelmed with the results. I think that the pictures don't show much, but I think that there's a couple extenuating circumstances that need to be talked about in regards to my situation. So first off is that I'm in a deficit. This is something that I didn't really think about, maybe just because it's abs. Because abs are accentuated by being leaner and all the other confounding factors. I just wasn't in my brain thinking of the abs as just a muscle group. They were like this special thing, right? So in my mind, I didn't think that, of course, I'm not going to build abs in a deficit because I'm in a deficit, so I'm not building muscle. The other side of that coin, of course, is that I had not been training them. If I hadn't been training my back for months and months and months leading up to it, despite the fact that I was in a deficit, I would still build back some of my back muscle by beginning to train back again. So I don't think that argument is quite as strong as I did when people first started making it on my post. Like 3 or 4 different people commented that I was in a deficit, so I wasn't going to build muscle, et cetera, et cetera. But after thinking about it, I came to that conclusion and realized that it is true, but it's also true that an untrained muscle has muscle memory and therefore should regain strength and size regardless of whether you're in a deficit. So with that in mind, I still am underwhelmed with the results. I don't think that my abs really changed much for the positive, especially when you consider that I lost 6 pounds of body weight along the way. I went from 191 pounds to 185 pounds between the pictures. And you can tell for sure that there's more definition in the lower abs, like the transverse type ab area, the ones below the belly button. But that is not, in my mind, a factor of having larger ab muscles. It's a factor of being leaner and showing the cuts more effectively.
Especially in that specific region.
Yeah, for sure. Like I have ab veins now down there, which I didn't have before. So there's clearly less body fat there. And so overall, I think I'm probably going to continue training them, but not on any sort of regular structure. I'm not going to probably do them twice a week. I think like I train legs twice a week, and I'll probably do them on one of the leg days. Like I'll throw in like 2 sets on one of the leg days or something like that. I still am underwhelmed by it to the point that I would say that if you are a like recreational fitnesser and you naturally have decent abs, you probably don't need to train them for the benefits that you're looking to achieve aesthetically. If you're trying to stand on stage and you're really trying to optimize everything, then you probably should train them a little bit and treat them like a regular muscle group. That's at least the conclusion that I've come to right now. I am going to continue training them. I may run this experiment again when I'm not in a deficit, which would probably require me to stop training them for a few months prior and then maybe start again, which I'm totally okay with. I'll take one for the team and not train abs. But it was definitely an interesting experiment. I'm glad that it forced me outside of my comfort zone. It forced me to do something that I wouldn't have done otherwise. It also kind of made me do calves because I would just like do a set of abs, then do a set of calves. And anytime I did one, I would always do the other. So that was actually kind of like a nice, unexpected positive as well. And that's kind of the end of my story.
I don't feel confident in either direction as of yet. We'll see. Like I said, I have about like two more weeks. I'm going to take the same pictures that I did before. Fortunately for me, my weight will be right around the same. Yeah. I just double checked it before. I was 192.7 on that day. I feel very confident I will be within a few tenths of that awesome. When I have my other one. So we'll be a little bit of a closer kind of 1-to-1 there. We'll see. I will add that I have found, I don't want to say like pleasure in training them, but it's not nearly as miserable as it used to be. And I think because I found like a happy medium. So what for me, the weighted cable crunch has been something that I just never learned how to do it properly. So now it's like I'm in that kind of like newbie, game phase where I'm like learning how to perform a movement properly, and I am getting enjoyment out of that. Like I'll record myself and I'm like, oh, hey, these look better. I'm feeling it, more than before. And that brings some sort of enjoyment just in terms of like movement mastery type of deal. The ab wheels I like doing. I think it's an easy design for me. I have a lengthened overload one. I have a shortened overload one. I'll do like one on one day, one on the other. I do about 2 sets, make them both really hard, and they take me 4 minutes type of deal. And I feel like I do feel a little bit better about like checking that box, right? And it is something that I think I will continue to do, probably at least through the end of the year just to see. And what I would say was the thing that's leading me to that is I have gotten to be about, I feel confidently saying I'm probably the leanest I've ever been since I've been like, in my 20s or whatever. When you're like a kid playing sports and stuff like that doesn't really count. I was underwhelmed at what my abs looked like. And like say, I have veins in them and stuff like that over them, but in terms of that, they don't look very good. And I think that they have looked better in the past when I was less lean. But then again, we were doing a lot more overhead type bracing, lifting, moving more heavier loads, compound lifting type of deal. I was wearing a belt for squats, deadlifts, clean sort of thing. So I was training them, indirectly. They were getting much more volume. So it has been an interesting, a little bit of an eye-opening thing for me. But to wrap up, I can't confidently say whether I think it is, objectively going to be better or worse right now.
Cool. No, I like that you're going to finish it out, and then we'll see how it goes, and then you'll have the pictures, and you'll be the same body weight, so it is a much more tangible and fair comparison. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So let's see, I am 184.4 pounds today, which is the lowest number of the diet so far, and it has been a crazy descent since I basically put a deadline on my diet. It's just been wild. So like last episode, so it was a week ago from today, I was 185.6, so I'm really only 1.2 pounds down from that. But the day before that, so 8 days ago, I was 188 pounds. So I'm like 3.6 pounds below where I was 8 days ago. And all of it has happened by reducing my steps, and I've been eating a higher number of like average calories, right? So I had a couple bad days in Breckenridge that we talked about last week where I had like 3,000 or 3,100 calories. And then I had one like pretty good day at like 2,500, 2,600. And then since then I came back and I had one low day. I had like a 2,000 or a 1,900 calorie day because I just wasn't hungry after all of the food that I ate at Breckenridge. So I just listened to my body. I had a low day, all good. That low day is what sparked the drop to 185.6 last week from 188. So I had this one low day. It dumped like 2.5 pounds of glycogen, and I was 185.6. And then since that point, I've been averaging 2,600 calories this past week, basically. And I'm now down another 1.2 pounds from that. So it's all like very interesting to me, and I'm not 100% sure what to think about it because throughout the diet, I've always felt like I saw changes on the scale represented based on what I did the prior day. So like I eat more food, I have 3,100 calories. Oh shit, there's more glycogen, blah, blah, blah. The scale goes up in weight. And then in a day or two later, it kind of comes down again and everything's back to normal. Now I'm starting to wonder if what I'm seeing is some sort of weird delay where I'm not seeing things represented the day after, but I'm seeing them 4, 5, 6 days later. Like I have this whole week now where I've been eating 2,600 calories, which should be too many calories. Like based on where I know about my metabolism and my activity level, 2,600 calories should not cause me to lose weight. And yet every single day it's going down 0.4, then another 0.4, then another 0.4, and it just keeps going down. So I'm wondering if like a few days from now, I'm going to be like, oops, scale's at 187 again. And like now suddenly I'm 5 pounds from my goal because there's this weird delay effect that started happening. And whether you've heard of anything like this, whether this is real, am I just making this up? Like, well, any thoughts on it?
Of course. So my thought, and I've wanted to bring this up in prior episodes, but I kind of just didn't. In terms like, when oftentimes I find that when you're speaking about this, you're very, very, very oversimplifying everything. When you're saying like, well, I had 1,800 calories this day, so that dropped 2.5 pounds of glycogen off. It's not that simple, especially if you ran that math. If you were to run the math on 2.5 pounds, how much carbs come from glycogen, how much water that pulls, right? 3 grams of water per each gram of muscle glycogen, you'd have to have like massive swings in carbohydrate in order to do this. There's more factors at play. Sodium levels, right? And sodium intake and how that is affected by a hormone called aldosterone with the kidneys. That kind of works in cycles. So this is why something can happen like 4 days later. The carbohydrates will move a lot faster or much more quickly as something with like aldosterone too. Another big one, as that we kind of talked about earlier in the podcast, your stress levels, cortisol. So these things will impact, and at this level of leanness, these will probably be your more prominent swings. So like a couple good nights of sleep could really move the scale down in a positive way. Same thing goes with a couple bad nights of sleep. The scale can really start climbing. And how the closer you get to like your goal in terms of the leaner you are, the more impactful these kind of less seemingly obvious things are. In the great examples, like you take people in peak week, right, who load before a show, they'll load 800 grams of carbohydrate and their body weight will go down. Things like this that seemingly do not make any logical sense, but we see it. I mean, if you talk to like any competitor who's been around, who's done it a while, they'll have these stories where things that happen that don't seemingly make sense. Or people will have, they'll fly, right? And they'll have like a stressful day of flying where a flight gets canceled and these different things. And even though they get their steps in, even though they get all their meals in because they prepared them, they come in and they're up 4 or 5 pounds overnight type of deal. So it's just, same thing with me this weekend, right? I underate, objectively underconsumed calories because I was hungry. But my weight was up like 3.5 pounds. I mean, I'm someone who my weight is very, very stable when I'm in control. So again, like kind of what I was just alluding to, I mean, the human anatomy, right? The human metabolism is so incredibly complex. The calories in, calories out is like the base of the pyramid in order to build your foundations upon it. But there's levels that go up. And I think it's the easiest way for us to wrap our heads around it, right? And to create a plan that allows us to be actionable. But once you get into like how lean you are and stuff, there's a lot more that's going to affect it than just your calories in, calories out. The last example I will use is people who do like really big, like I have a client who did an ultra marathon race this weekend. They will come. I'm expecting scale to be up in the days following. Easily 3 to 7 pounds.
Inflammation,
or something like that. Inflammation, the stress response, right, from doing something like that, and then I know in next week's check-in or whatever, we'll start to see things sliding back down into that normal, and we're now talking like 7, 12, 14 days post. So there's a lot of different moving pieces, and it's trying to like boil it down to like a 24, 48 hour period is just it's just a little bit short-sighted from a lot of the things that I've seen.
No, that's awesome. I love that because I do tend to think of things like really simplistically because I'm like, how can I make sense of this in my brain without like confusing and having to add in all of these different variables that complicate the process, right? So I'm like, okay, glycogen in, calories in, calories down, glycogen out. I think my sodium is really stable day to day because since you started having me at the beginning of this diet, start actually taking sodium in the morning, that I've been very, very consistent with the amount that I've been using, and then I put little bits sparingly here and there on food items as desired, but it's always just meats and veggies that I put it on.
When you were in Breckenridge, how many meals out?
Well, every meal. Yeah. So that's a huge thing too. Like that's why one of the reasons the scale went up to 188 or whatever, probably because I was having so much sodium from eating out and all that. But
that different foods you're not used to. Same thing like me this weekend, right? I have foods I don't have control over. Ate out at a restaurant, weight goes up.
Yeah.
Like it is pretty much unequivocal across the board.
I still think, and I know that this is simplifying it, but if I would have just kept it 2,600 calories every day in Breckenridge instead of going up to like a 32 and a 3,100 calorie day or whatever, I can't go back and know this for sure, but I feel like the scale wouldn't have jumped. Like maybe it would have been a pound or half a pound or something like that, but it wouldn't have been 3 pounds from that time in Breckenridge.
Probably not as much. The eating out is hard because it's very hard to accurately estimate how much you're actually getting, right? Because they could say like, oh, it's a 4 ounce steak. Well, it's actually like a 3.72 ounce steak type of deal. Or, oh, it's a cup of rice. It's actually like 1.3 cups of rice. So like that part of it, the oils, right? And then different things that are in like additives, emulsifiers, different ingredients that maybe you just have like a low grade digestive intolerance to that cause inflammation in their own right. So it's just like many variables.
I always overestimate when I go out, but I think that actually could be, it could explain things too. Like it could explain why the scale went up to 188 just briefly, but from all those things you're saying, like the sodium and stuff like that, and then why it went back down like 2.5 pounds the next day, because maybe I was thinking I was having 3,200 calories because I was eating out every meal. I was overestimating things, and maybe it really was more like 27 or 2,800. I guess you just can't really know when you eat out, so that's the variable.
It's difficult. It really is.
Yeah, well, I for whatever simple way my mind works, it's been trending down, and I've been sleeping really well, which is, to your point, potentially a factor. And I'm going to be slightly bummed if in the next few days, for no reason, it just goes back up to like 187. I'm going to be like, oh, just a piece of my soul just got sucked out, you know?
I don't anticipate that happening. Well, depending on what you control. If you're still controlling everything like you are now, there's no like, free meals out, anything like that, or like a random high day. Short of you having like another stressful situation where Bryson's out of school, no nanny, like those sort of, and no, outside of those, I don't anticipate anything like that happening.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty dialed in right now too. Like since I made that proclamation that I was putting a deadline on it, it's been way easier, to be honest. Like it's just kind of like, this is what I'm doing. There isn't really like another option. I just need to do it and be done with it, and I don't want to fuck around with like delaying it anymore. So definitely the psychological side of that. And I guess that kind of plays into, we can talk about my strength cycle next episode or at the end here, because I think that transitions well into the psychological consideration stuff you're talking about. Do you want to frame it up?
Yeah, so I've been getting some DMs and stuff on Instagram lately, and questions. And I can, in what's really interesting to me is, at this point, right, we've been doing this for, years and stuff like that. To me, it seems like people know these things now. And then every once in a while I get reminded that like people are, someone reaching out to me is where I was when I was in like year 3, asking me that year 3 question. So I think that, we've as a industry have really moved past that, but everyone comes into different spots, and it's a good reminder that every once in a while, it's like people really still need these basics and stuff like that, and understanding. So what I wanted to kind of just talk around a little bit is just psychological considerations around where training and nutrition fit into your lifestyle. And we'll obviously use ourselves as examples and talk about it a little bit, but I think kind of what I want to get at is there's these kind of like inflated or these inflated perceptions or misconceptions around what is possible or even realistic, and what it takes to achieve these relative to its priority in your life. So, for example, I'll get a message, and some lady messaged me, and she was like, I'm trying to go through a calorie deficit right now, but I have this like ravenous hunger, and then I like binge on all these things, and I overeat, and I just don't have time because I have my 4 kids and I'm working. And I'm like, whoa, lady. You have 4 kids, you have a full-time job, right? You're hungry. Like, this calorie deficit is only going to objectively make your life worse. Yep. You know what I mean? And I think people don't always quite understand that, and they think that like, oh, so-and-so can do it, like Bryan can do it, Aaron can do it, like why can't I? And for some reasons, like I don't want to make it seem like we are like on this pedestal or anything like that, but we've gone through those like low paces to like build up to where we are now, where like steps 1 through 4 are effortless, right? Like you don't have to think about like, did I have enough water today? Am I eating vegetables today, type of thing. Like those things that's just who you are now, type of deal, right? So where you are in that relative of this like kind of, fitness, nutrition, lifestyle, like character arc is really going to depend on where that fits into your life. So what I kind of just wanted to talk about is like, do you see, or like with where you're currently at, right? Or where you were at maybe in a different phase of your life, like what are the differences you kind of see, or some of the things that were realizations for you that like, hey, in order for me to look like this, these are things I have to like let go of my old life, or that sort of thing. Because that's where people get confused or don't understand. People don't realize that like, hey, if I want to go drinking on the weekends and eat out for, lunch and dinner, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm probably not going to be 10% body fat with abs and look like that because of that trade-off between having that flexibility and that body composition that comes along with that. So I just want to get your thoughts around a lot of that I just went on.
Yeah, I think in a very simple way, it comes down to controlling what you can control in each period of your life. So if we look at like college, Bryan, who still wanted to be jacked, that was like my mission in life, was to be jacked, right? And I was still as obsessed with lifting culture as I ever was. But there were girls and beer and fried food in the cafeteria, right? So these were things that, like, I was in college. My main priority in college, and I knew this going in, my main priority was to hang out with friends and have a good time. Schooling was probably like right behind weightlifting. So like the actual education I was getting came like third after strength training. So the first part was having fun, and I knew that. So therefore, my Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights, and sometimes Sunday days were about having fun. And in those times, I knew that I wasn't going to be perfect because I would be drinking and I would be having long periods of time between meals and things like that. But I knew that when I did eat, that I was going to be eating a lot of protein because that was one thing that I could control. So every time there was food available, if it was chicken or burgers or hot dogs or any kind of meat item, that was the first thing I was going for when I was drinking. Make sure I'm getting that protein in there. On the days and even the periods of day where I wasn't drinking. So if I was drinking Sunday daytime, then Sunday night was just a normal, healthy meal for me. If I started drinking Tuesday night and Thursday night, well, Tuesday day and Thursday day were still really good, productive days where I was going to go to the gym and I was going to eat relatively quality food and control the things that I could control within the spectrum of where my priorities lie in that period of my life. As we got up into like the CrossFit days, I think that the process got a little bit more streamlined where fun became less of the goal and competing in CrossFit and excelling in CrossFit became more of the goal. But we still had aspects of that fun side of us, right? Like we still did go out and have beers and have gym parties and things like that. And we still did stupid things like all you can eat wings and pizza night, and where we just feel like trash and do a 60-minute EMOM the next day because we're trying to burn it off or whatever, right? So none of these things are like optimal in the grand scheme of the whole vision of what we're trying to achieve as being jacked as possible. But they are things that force us to be creative and to rely on the principles and the building blocks that we know are successful, so that even in times where we're not being as optimal as possible, we're still creating a version of success. We're still checking the boxes, right? What do you think of that?
I love it because it follows pretty much the exact same arc, that I had gone through. When in college, it was like the lifting culture, that desire was always there, but it was within the confines of the container that I put it in. I was like, I want to be jacked. I want to look good, but I also want to binge drink Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and not track any of my food. So within that container, you can look, better than your average college student, but you're not going to look like that dude who's only drinking maybe once every couple weeks, understands his portions and different things. And what I really like was you brought up, like, I just know I need to eat protein, right? So that was something that I thought, and a lot of people think this. But what often is a downfall to people with that is they aren't yet aware of needing to separate protein and fat. For example, burgers. Great protein source, right? Yes, there are protein in burgers. There is an enormous amount of fat in your burger. That burger is not 95-5. It is not 90-10. It's probably not even 85-15.
80-20,
it's an 80-20 burger.
With cheese and like avocado.
With cheese. And when it comes to that, probably 60 to 70% of the calories from that burger with cheese and avocado are going to be from fat. And you're left over with the 30 to 35% of protein. So while you're thinking like, oh man, I'm getting great protein, 40 grams of protein from this burger, right? 40 grams protein times 4, we're talking 160 calories of protein. There's probably 60, 65 grams of fat in that burger. And you multiply 9 times 6,
500
whatever.
something, 540 calories.
Exactly. And this is what people don't understand. And that's when they come back on the weekend, they're up a few pounds, they're like watery, they don't look good. And like there's these, it's just, you don't know what you don't, know yet. And one of the, with my clientele, one of the first things that I'll teach them is like the dichotomy between objectivity and subjectivity, right? And what I mean by that is like you have that crazy aunt that's like, oh, fruit, that's sugar, you shouldn't have fruit, fruit's bad for you. And then I'm like, okay, so this is the example, but objectively, like you can have 200 grams of strawberries for 11 grams of carbohydrate, right? There's tons of micronutrient in them, they're nutrient dense, like stop fucking listening to your aunt. You know what I mean? So objectively, strawberries are a fantastic option for pretty much everyone across the board, unless you have a food allergy to strawberries. And it's, going through that phase and just understanding these things, those are like those kind of tide shift type things. And understanding that like where you're at, irrespective to where you want to be, and this is what I kind of want to get into next, generally requires letting go of some older aspects of your life. Now, maybe those paces of life naturally take you through them. For example, girls and beer aren't as enticing now as they once were, and that makes things like adhering to your calorie deficit easier because you don't have these like desires anymore type of deal. And also, the longer you go, the more information and knowledge you gain along the way, which helps you make some of those decisions. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say life is not quite as exciting and unpredictable without girls and beer.
Unpredictable, yes, I would agree with that. I don't know, depending on, I think as your values change, and your desires change, that kind of shifts.
No, I was being facetious. I mean, clearly, like being married and having kids is the tits. I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah, and then what I really want to talk about, and it's why it's a really great example to have you obviously to talk about it, is as we move into this position, right? You're a family man, right? You're not Bryan the beer pong king anymore, although you're probably still very good at beer pong, but you're Bryan the family man. However, these things, you're still able to achieve this really, I mean, obviously you look fantastic, you're still strong, you're basically as good as you've ever been, but you have the family now, right? You have the wife, you have the kids, you have these other things, but you're still able to perform at this high level. You're still able to optimize all these things. So I just wanted to see like, what are these kind of shifts that you have now that allow you to do this? And then what kind of maybe sacrifices would you say, maybe if any, maybe there are none, you have made that allow you to kind of have the best of both worlds?
It's a good question. First off, I think I need to mention that being in the industry makes this whole process of committing so much easier. I mean, I have like built-in accountability every single day because I post to my Instagram story, and I force myself into these like personal objective boxes, and then I put them out publicly and tell people I am going to train abs for 8 weeks, and I am going to do this diet, and I'm going to post my body weight every single day, and you guys are holding me accountable to achieve these goals, right? So I'm creating an accountability for myself using social media. And maybe this is a way in which others can actually do it too. Like maybe you don't have a following on social media, but I'm sure you have some people that follow you on social media. You have some friends, you can tell them about it. I think that telling people that you're going to do something is a really, really good way to actually follow through and do something. And that's essentially what I'm doing online. So that would be my number one. Do you have anything to add to that?
I love that. So I think what I don't want to lose sight of the being in the industry changes things a little bit because I have my own thoughts around that. But saying you're doing something publicly, putting it out there completely changes everything. So last year when I said I'm giving up alcohol for the year, right? I put it out there, I put it publicly. When we would go to parties, right? I went to parties and they'd be like, I didn't say, oh, I don't drink anymore, or I'm not drinking tonight. I said, oh, I'm on a year-long goal of not drinking. And then that fostered like a conversation around it. And it always came back really positively. No one was like, that's fucking stupid. You're dumb. Like, let's drink. There was a couple times where you're like, I think next year I'm going to try that,
Okay.
and
That's
I was
cool.
like, it was very, very cool. Also, when I did the cold showers, right? That was miserable.
Yep.
It was absolutely miserable. But if I didn't put that out there, I maybe would have made it a week, maybe 2
Yeah.
weeks, maybe 3 weeks, not an entire year, especially as we went to places where it was very cold outside and snowing and stuff like that. It changes your accountability. And because it's for a lot of us, and I'm putting myself in this category as well, we may not have like the strongest perception or will to like follow through on things for ourselves. But when we externalize that, right, and for better or for worse, to be completely honest, it just forces your level of commitment to a new level because you don't want to fail in front of other people. And again, for better or for worse. I'm not saying this is
No,
an
for
objectively
sure, yeah.
a positive thing. But like sometimes, like if I set a goal, right, I'm like, I'm going to do this, whatever, and I don't tell anyone else, and it's not that important to me, and then I don't do it, I'm like, oh, whatever, I didn't fucking care about it anyway. But if I have to like face people, someone's like, Aaron, you said you were going to do this and you didn't, like, why? That's much harder for me to own up to. So I will be miserable for an entire year just so I don't have to have that conversation with some random stranger on the internet. But it kind of pushes you kind of towards that.
Yeah.
So that was my kind of follow-up. Like that objectivity just by sharing your goals with others is fantastic.
To be honest, I think I would have struggled to do this diet for 5 months if I didn't put that accountability out there. Like there were many days where I was like, at the end of the night, like I literally could just go demolish every perfect food bar in Whole Foods right now and no one would ever have to know about it, And then like I don't do it because I know I'm going to have to wake up and post my weight in the morning and then I'm going to have to say, why is the scale up so much? I'm going to have to explain it. And like, it's like this whole process in my head. And at the end of the day, I'm so much happier for it because I don't have the shitty food. I don't feel like trash the next day. My gut isn't all messed up. I'm still working towards a goal. I demonstrated self-control. And all of this is to be thankful for the fact that there are people holding me accountable out in the internet world. So I like 100% understand and empathize with the plight of the person that doesn't do that. Like, that's why I said, like, go tell people. Like, it doesn't have to be people on social media that are holding you accountable. It can be your family or your friends or whatever it is. Put it on Facebook and let the 130 friends that you have, like, see it and comment on it and be like, you got it, girl, go for it, So those are all kind of tactics you can take. But to kind of circle back to what you were saying about, like, what do I think I'm sacrificing at this point, given that I have the family and everything like that? It's an interesting question because part of me wonders whether the story I tell myself that I love all of these foods, these like savory foods and salty foods and sweet foods and baking and all these things that I do that force me into that kind of 5 low days and 2 high days structure. I wonder how much of that really is like what I really want versus how much of it is me just kind of doing that because that fits into the lifestyle better of that my family lives. So like date nights are important because it's an opportunity for Kim and I to connect and get away from the kids. And we endear these times and we look forward to them. But I can never get out of a date night without subjectively like 1,400 calories. Like it's just really, really hard to go to a restaurant and have like a steak or a chicken breast and a starch and a veggie and not feel like I need to count that as 1,400 calories for all the reasons we discussed about not knowing what's in it and all these things. So that's one piece of like, I could have an 800 calorie meal that looks the exact same and have it at home. And then I know exactly what's in it and I know that it's 800 calories and it's probably more filling as well. There's that piece. And then there's the piece of like, I find myself baking, but am I baking because like I really enjoy the process of baking? or like because my family wants to eat it. And then, I of course end up having like one bite of batter, and then I have like a nibble off the cake, and then, oh shit, another nibble off the cake. And like, then I'm in my log writing down like 3 bites of cake, 7 grams of fat, 21 carbs, and I'm like, and every time I'm doing it, I'm like, man, I could have just not done that. And like, is it because I have kids that I'm doing that, or is it something that I would be doing if I was living by myself all alone, and like, or living with some other bro and we were just living this like super focused bodybuilder lifestyle together? Like, maybe the way that I implement these things would be different, and maybe I wouldn't have these high days and these fluctuations and all that. So I don't exactly know the answer to the question, but I think the sacrifice is small enough that it doesn't really derail my results, because I know that if I have the 2 high days, I just have the 5 low days. And in the grand scheme of things, it all kind of offsets and it all works out. I don't know that the quality of the calories, like, that could be a small argument, is like, oh, if I'm having a few bites of cake here and like a few bites there and like these bad oils at the restaurant here, like I could have replaced those with like higher quality calories. And at the end of the day, I don't know that has like a dramatic effect on results. We kind of know for the most part that it's calories in, calories out, macronutrients, like things like that. So it might be minimal. It probably would have more effect on the way I feel than on the way I look, is kind of my thought process on that. And then regarding like training, there's a few times, maybe 3 times a month, where my training is slightly interrupted because Bryson is watching the iPad in the gym while I work out, and like I have to talk to him between sets instead of staying focused, or I have to put my workout off a day. Like, that's the worst case, is like, oh, this kid's sick and our nanny didn't show up. I can't work out today. I'm going to have to work out tomorrow, or something like that. So small sacrifices like that. But again, I struggle to believe that those types of sacrifices actually move the needle enough to like make a noticeable difference in anything, right?
I agree. I think if we were to be like as objective as possible, or I don't want to use the term objective there, as realistic as possible. Let's say you're the same Bryan you are right now, 39 years old. If you didn't have a wife and family, do you think you would actually look better than you do right now?
Probably not.
I don't think it would be noticeable. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Or I'm glad you kind of felt that way, because if you were like, yeah, I think so, I'd be like, fuck, I don't know where to go now. So I think like that's kind of what I wanted to get at. Like at there becomes this point, right, where it's who you are. It like the training, the nutrition, like that is a part of defining Bryan Borstein, right? And then as you move into these new phases of life, like that is part of it, right? There's multiple aspects that make your personality and things like that. Obviously the wife, the family, morals, the values, that sort of thing, and then things that are very important to you, right? Everyone has these sorts of things. So that's kind of what I was getting at, is when it becomes important enough for you, when it is a priority somewhere on your priority list. I don't think for really anyone it should go above like, wife, family, etc. But you can still make like loads and loads of progress. You can, you can be that 99th percentile of the population, how you look, and objectively healthy, all these things. It just comes down to more so like the psychology of it and the decision making, as opposed to what people say like time, these sorts of things. Or I think the pitfalls that so many people fall into is they're not playing the long game. They're playing the like, I saw this commercial, I'm super motivated, I need it tomorrow, like what can I do? Yeah. And then that motivation fades, and then they're like, oh, this isn't attainable, it's my genetics, or like all these different things. And it's like, dude, you played the game for fucking 72 hours. You need to play it for like ever 72 months. So I think that's kind of what I wanted to get into. And then there's one thing you briefly brought up around being in the industry. In terms of like a career, what I wanted to make sure we circle back onto that one too. Anything you have thoughts there?
No, I mean, I think it just makes it easier. I mean, it's just like, it kind of goes into the accountability piece, where like my physique and the way I hold myself and the things that I do become things that kind of other people look at and maybe try to emulate. So it's not that I have to exist on a pedestal in any way, but the more that I can do things the right way and put out messages that people kind of resonate with and see the success as a result of, I think that then has like a little bit of a trickle down effect and can have more of a positive impact on people along the way. So if you're not in the industry, then you don't really have that kind of like intrinsic pressure to do things a certain way. And it is easier to not at times. A perfect example is like the 3 years that I worked in corporate America before I was in the industry. I didn't care any less about training, but the time that I would work out would be at lunchtime because it got me out of the office and the gym was really close, and I would hit a 45-minute one body part, like it was my bro split time. So I was like back day. I'd go in, I'd do 45 minutes of back, I'd come back to work, right? But if I was busy at work and I didn't make it for whatever reason, I had a lunch meeting, something like that, there was no chance I was going after work to do that workout. Like it was either happening at lunch or I just was going to do it the next day, because at the end of work, I was going home to sit on the couch and eat food and watch Sports Center or a movie. And that was what I was doing. So it didn't have the same level of importance. Like it was still really, really important, but it wasn't that important. So I think it just becomes kind of easy if you're not in the industry to do things like that and make these little mini excuses that maybe once, twice, 3 times don't really matter, but over the course of time, maybe they do add up a little bit.
Yeah. What I think is interesting for myself personally is I obviously spent a lot longer outside of the industry than you did. I worked in software for 7 years before formally, full-time making the jump. I always wanted to be like in though. You know what I mean? It was like, I did this software job, but I really wanted to be in the industry type of thing. And that kind of, I agree with what you said. So like when let's say like work blew up my training and like I couldn't go type of thing, or there was these other things, it was easier for me to not make the decisions that I do now, but it was never because I didn't want to. It was like a little bit more of the circumstance, or the control was a little bit just further outside my direct hands-on type of thing. Mm-hmm. Since moving in, it's been, now this has been probably one of the largest like psychological realizations I guess I should say. I have lost through some, and being fully transparent, I can't say if this is for better or for worse. This is just where I am now. I have lost that, that Aaron Straker connection to the food that Aaron Straker eats. So it's like a personal connection, whereas now my diet, the food that I feed myself, my grocery shopping, the different things that I try is from Aaron Straker, the nutrition coach, and how this can better serve his clients to deliver a better nutrition coaching experience. So I have removed like the food that goes in my body in terms of like a personal connection to me as the person. It is me as the business type of thing. It makes it much easier, right? However, I do anticipate at some point down the road this causing some issue for me. For example, I am now slightly fearful, and these could be completely unfounded fears, just putting it out there. I am worried about when the family happens, when I have a family, how I'm going to adjust to eating meals with family, not being like, because right now it's like, if I don't fucking want it, I'm not going to eat it. Yeah. And you can get pissed or whatever if you want, but like, I don't think I'm going to take that attitude into like when I have kids and they're like, but dad, I want this, and I'm not going to be like, well, fuck you, Aaron wants goddamn chicken breast, so go deal with it. I don't think I'm going to do that, hopefully. So I do foresee that becoming like a little bit of an issue, but it has been a really big strength for me thus far. So when I kind of got my start and when I was building everything that I have now, is like, I always want to lead from the front. I never want to be one of the do as I say, not as I do coaches. I'm a do as I do because I do this and I know it fucking works type of thing. So that has been a strength for me. But I have lost a little bit of that like personal identity to food a little bit. However, I said it briefly. I'm not sure if that's for better or for worse, because I think from an objective, like pure health, like, metrics of like serum labs type thing, it's probably been a net positive. I don't know how the psychological, mental aspect will fit in with that. So that has made it much easier, because now whenever I'm dieting, I'm not dieting for Aaron, I'm dieting for Aaron and his clients, so that we can learn better strategies. When so-and-so run into this situation, I know exactly how to solve it because I've been there before, type of deal. So that's been a big strength for me. Again, it may present some issues in the future when I cross some sort of bridges, and as life takes me through these next paces of my character arc type deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, your food selections are also partially a piece of your digestion issues, I feel. So I don't really see you compromising a whole ton with the family, just because you're not going to want to put yourself in a position to feel like shit. So I think that you'll find a way to have your food and their food, and you guys can exist in unison. And, I do the same thing with my kids too. Like throughout this diet, like I don't eat what they eat every night, or I'd be having like quesadillas and mac and cheese for 3/4 of my meals. So like literally, I have my like chicken and veggies and potato or rice or whatever. And then I whip up a quesadilla for them on the side, and we all have our meals and we eat together, and it is what it is, So I think that you'll find a similar rhythm with yourself too.
Perfect. I like that. That quells that fear a little bit for me right there.
Well, I think ultimately to give other people hope too, when it comes to like, if I'm not in the industry and I'm just living like a normal life, and I do go out and have a few drinks, and I don't always hit my weight sessions or whatever, like I really do believe that if for a really, really long time you do like 80% across all the categories, like you're 80% with nutrition, you're 80% with sleep, you're 80% with stress, you're 80% with training, that I think over the course of time, like decade, you're going to get 95+% of the result, to the point that like you could live that lifestyle that has a lot more freedom and fun. And if your genetics are decent, you could look way, 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 way better than people that commit 100% optimality for everything for their entire life, and you could do that 80% of all the categories and look better than that person. So not to say that genetics are on a pedestal and that genetics matter the most, but as long as you're checking most of the boxes, you can still look really, really fantastic and still live a normal life.
I would agree with that. I think what would be cool to wrap up with is let's try and put some numbers around that. So for me, what you just said, the thing that comes to mind is like body fat percentage levels. Like mitigating that is like the hardest thing to do. I think with your, if you're just living your life right, you go out to eat on the weekends, you have a little bit more flexibility. I don't think that's probably going to impact the amount of muscle you build, maybe at some very minor, insignificant amount. But what it would probably manifest most is you just carry a little bit more body fat more regularly.
Well, yeah. So I think that what that comes down to for like a realistic person is you live your life for a decade, say, and you don't even think about your body fat more than the fact that you're eating around maintenance. So, you're maybe 15% body fat, up to 20% body fat. It doesn't really matter. You're in a healthy range, and you just kind of live life, and you have a few drinks, and you eat out, and you train. You very rarely miss sessions, but missing sessions is fine. You push them on to the next day, whatever. You're literally one 12-week cut away from being really impressed with what you have. So you can live 10 years of the 80% lifestyle, and then 12 weeks of the 99% lifestyle, and you will not miss out on very much than the person that did 10 years at 99%. I think it would be a lot closer than people think.
Striking distance is what I like to refer. I think, I was going to say for me, I think for most, I would say that like 13 to 15% body fat is, and I'm talking about males now.
That's still really lean though. Like I feel like a 13 to 15, you look at yourself and you're like, I look pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. But I think like you don't have to be going through like bulk cut cycles.
No, you could just. I said 15 to 20 because I think like for an average person who's living corporate America and eating out on the weekends and having a few beers, 13 to 15 seems pretty lean for me.
13 is pretty lean. Yeah, you would probably it needs to be a little bit more important in your life for it to that. But I think that 15 to 20% range, like, yeah, you train, you're active, your health is important to you, but you want to find that balance between your lifestyle, however you define that. I think that's pretty accurate. And then, yeah, I would say you are the 12 weeks of very dedicated effort, hiring a decent coach from getting you to like being like, damn, I look pretty fucking fantastic.
Yeah, and you basically went through 9.5 years of being able to live a very like free, enjoyable, like non-stressed out macro tracking life, and then you take 12 weeks to dial it in perfectly. And I macro tracking life. I saw the way you looked at that one.
I have my own thoughts.
I believe that, you know, as it pertains to me, like I cannot track. Even 10 years ago, Bryan, before I had 15 years of tracking experience, I could have just maintained 15 to 20% body fat and never thought about food beyond getting sufficient protein. And I would have been that avatar of that 80% person that was between 15 to 20% body fat and just was 12 weeks away from looking fantastic. So I would say the macro game being you're eating an amount that keeps you between 15 to 20% body fat, so you're not going crazy and continually gaining more body fat, and you're eating a sufficient amount of protein, call it 0.8 to 1.2 grams per pound of body weight regularly per day, then you would fall into the category that I'm talking about. So at some point you have to be aware of the amount of protein you're eating and the amount of calories that you're eating, but you don't need to like sit there and scratch out macros for eternity to reach that goal.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that would just come down like pretty much the basics of your food structure and how it fits your life. Yeah. If you're eating mostly foods that are grown, harvested, raised, slaughtered, etc., limiting absolute awful things for you to maybe weekends, a couple times a month, something like that, you can do it pretty subjectively to that 80% very well.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you want to add to this one,
No,
Bryan?
I think that was productive.
Cool. And I think it's a really cool conversation. Again, I've been getting a handful of messages about it, so I thought it would be really sweet to talk about long format, especially now that we've gone through some of the different phases of our character arcs. Bryan a little bit ahead of me, but now I have a little bit of a framework to follow, which I'm excited for. So cool. As always, guys, thank you for tuning in. Bryan and I will talk to you next week. Later.